This is your host, Trevor Kouritzin. We are coming at you live from the Evolutionary Radio headquarters. As always, my faithful co-host, Steve Smee, is joining me.
Hey, what's up, guys? How's your June going? We have a great guest ahead.
This is a guest you might not have heard of, but I want to get this guy on because he's an absolute genius, especially when it comes to functional medicine and hormones. Vince Pitstick, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
The pleasure's all mine, Vince. So because most of our listeners have never heard of you before, tell us your background. You know, what got you interested in nutrition? What got you interested in hormones? How did this all start for you?
That's a great question. I mean, it was really, really base for me. You know, 15 years ago, bodybuilding was just kind of becoming a thing, you know, and I was a trainer at Gold's Gym near Chicago, a bigger facility, and pretty much at first, learning the basics of like supplementation, vitamins, how to eat, had everything to do with just how my body responded, right? And then it started becoming about my clients, and then it started becoming about learning about, you know, it was at that time that we just started hearing about like vitamin D and fish oil, like what are these things, right? I mean, some of these concepts have been around, but to be applied somewhat in the fitness industry was relatively new. And I started working with a facility called Revitalize MD that was out there. And they were doing this thing where they were bringing clients in and doing a full hormone spectrum, vitamins, spectral cell testing, intracellular minerals. And they also, at the time, I was working with this health company that was having me do in-home training for morbidly obese. And I started realizing that a lot of the origins of the issue weren't just fitness related, like to beat obesity or beat some of these issues that I was seeing and some of the issues that I was seeing in that medical office wasn't just going to be reps and set cauliflower and chicken or chicken and rice. And the physicians there started teaching me a lot about how functions can change how a training affects you, how your functions can change how food affects you, or the macros that you're eating at the time. Because I was into bodybuilding at the time, and I was helping some people then. I ended up developing a pretty big program in conjunction with these medical facilities, learning about it. Well, that was like 10 years ago. The journey goes long, but I'm going to fast forward through some of it so I don't put anybody to sleep. But I got picked up once in a lifetime opportunity to become a functional medicine consultant. There was just so happens that one of the big heads of a corporate natural medicine company called Metagenics was looking for hungry young guys that were building processes like this to help medical centers build them. And so they took me out to California. I did a lot of training under functional medicine greats like Jeffrey Bland, Mark Hyman. I got to learn from trainings like from Dr. Fabrizio Mancini and Amy Myers. And these are names in the functional medicine industry that are big names today. And they're all what we call Blandites, okay? So Jeffrey Bland is one of the, I guess, the godfather, you'd say, of like lifestyle medicine, right? Some of the things that that the fitness industry is just learning today, he came up with in his head when everyone thought he was crazy 30, 40 years ago. And so then from there, I continued my bodybuilding career. I competed in the NPC for a while, did fairly well. I worked with a coach here locally by the name of Monty Mabry here in near Dayton, actually. And, so it was at the time while I'm learning this stuff about functional medicine, I'm applying the performance program in my life, right? Like a fitness performance program. And I'm going to all of these seminars and research and going in and understudying under physicians and then going and helping other programs try to grow and flourish. Like, the medical industry has a problem with performance, right? People go there because they have joint issues, but they also want to lose weight. People want to increase their ability to produce muscle, but they have diabetes, right? And so what I was learning at the time, and I didn't realize this is what I was doing years ago, was looking at how things worked perfectly when you've got someone who's really healthy in a competition process. And it helped me understand what wasn't working in diabetes, blood sugar mismanagement, hormone issues, autoimmune conditions, sarcopenia. The list goes on and on and on, right? So I kept trying to get physicians to build these processes together, to adopt some processes that come from the bodybuilding world into their medical programming while they were prescribing their medications and watching over them and things like that. Did that for a very, very long time. I did that here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then through certifications, additional ones that I got through as a first-line therapist and going on for other health coaching and nutrition. And I'd gotten a degree from Illinois State University, and then some of my understudy work was in nutrition. And so you kind of put all that together, and I was like, you know what? I got this dream because nobody's doing it right. Nobody's blending it right. The doctor's offices wouldn't do enough on accountability. They weren't guiding their diets. They weren't looking at it from a perspective of fitness at all. Like, there really wasn't an idea about how to train, you know? And then at the same time, there was all of these functional medicine gifts, man, bundled in medicine that the fitness industry does not utilize. And I said to myself, I want to create a place that did both, that brought it all together, right? The new era, hopefully one day, ushering in this concept of bridging the gap. And so I left a cozy $100,000 job, and I opened up my own company called Nutrition Dynamic in the back of a chiropractic office with 4 clients in Waynesville, Ohio, which, if anyone's listening, should not know where that is because it's in the middle of nowhere. And we went from basically nothing to today, over 22 coaches seeing people across the world. We have about 200 to 300 active clients at any one time. We got a full competition program. We see all kinds of sports athletes. We got 2 locations, and I'm raising up coaches now and trying to teach them the fundamentals. And we're trying to make this thing a movement, man.
So can you tell us a little bit about, because I'm looking at your Instagram page, and you show transformations, which are really, really impressive. Can you tell us a little bit, can you define what functional medicine means?
Yeah, I got ahead of myself in the description. Some of this stuff is very base bones and functional medicine. So to understand what functional is, let's talk about what medicine is first. So when you see a doctor, you're going to somebody called an allopath. Allopathic medicine, Western medicine, is defined by the study of 12 different systems in the body. And the concept is to look at that system and for a physician to get specific and understand that system and how it works in and of itself. All right? So in functional medicine, the idea is to understand how those systems work together to create things like how you feel, how your body works, how it all comes together, the functional processes. So what's a really good example? Perfect example would be weight loss, right? Weight loss. If you were a doctor, if you went to an allopath for weight management issues, typically one of the first people you're going to see is an endocrinologist, because they're going to look at the thyroid and the neuroendocrine pathway. Then you might see, right, an OB, maybe just looking at hormones, right? Or just looking at, your birth control or something like that. You might go see what they start to have now is called these integrative medicine doctors, which kind of look at a little bit of everything, and it's becoming a newer thing. But then again, they're still applying functional medicine. That's not true allopathic medicine. And if you went to a functional medicine doctor, they're going to say, okay, how do hormones interact with the thyroid, interact with the adrenals versus what you're eating going to do to put these functions, these systems together into a function, and looking for the root cause of the problem, not chasing the symptom. If you went to a heart doctor, said you have high blood pressure, cardiovascular doctor, they'd put you on a blood pressure medicine because of the symptom of blood pressure, high blood pressure. A functional medicine doctor is going to ask you, why do you have high blood pressure? And what can we do about the why to change the fact that you have high blood pressure? I hope that's simple enough.
So you're basically trying to solve the problem versus solve the symptom.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this sounds really interesting because I've been to doctors over the course of my life for all kinds of things. And to be honest with you, they've solved zero of my issues. I've either had to solve them myself, or I've had to change my lifestyle or whatever, or I have issues that are existing that never were solved. So if I were to, if someone comes to you, what are the typical things that people are coming to you with? Is it mostly weight loss? Is it thyroid? What is the most things that you seem to get?
Really interesting. It comes in waves, man. What I thought my career was going to be, 4.5, 5 years ago, to now. First, let me say, you're exactly right. I was working inside the system, trying to help doctors change the way they view how to deal with somebody in different, especially chronic disease issues. Not necessarily like genetic disorders, because a lot of times those true genetic disorders, which is only about 5% of disease, and like certain cancers and certain things like that, yeah, you just go straight allopathic, and there's even some debate on certain cancers about not, but there's good parts about medicine. I don't want to bash it, okay? But the way that insurance and the system is set up, and the way that a standard of care is decided, that doctor is really almost like, and I hate to say it this way, I hope I don't offend anybody, but a puppet on a string due to the network they work for, or what insurance will allow them to prescribe or treatments to provide. And I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. I can't sit here and try to get you to sell 5 more bottles of vitamin D when you won't even start looking at like, hey, how are you eating? Maybe because you're sitting 12 hours a day is why your low back hurts. Maybe because you're not doing low weight, high rep, things for your legs is why your knees hurt. If you started to use it, maybe it would go away. Or looking at fish oil and other things that could make that joint pain go away. So to fast forward to your question that you just asked me, my career has taken so many different shapes. Yes, weight loss is like almost with every case. And that's because most chronic conditions or inflammatory conditions lead to weight gain. So as a secondary side effect, weight gain is a symptom. But 9 out of 10 times, it has way more to do with hormonal imbalance, and HPA axis imbalance. And what's HPA? Hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. And they all interact with each other to make what's called catecholamines, or what everyone's going to know as your stress hormones. Sex hormones and stress hormones, because of how somebody lives, depending if they feed themselves enough for the training that they're doing, or if they're just living life and not taking care of themselves, what we call the standard American diet, the SAD diet, causes these big imbalances, and particularly in women, because it affects what's called the OAT, the ovarian adrenal thyroid axis. And that's why today, if you guys look, we're at 70% overweight and obese. 25% of children have some kind of blood sugar issue or diabetes. If you look at hormone issues, 1 in 4 men have low testosterone, and that's defined as having a serum level of under 300 ng per DL. And it's happening so fast to our society, and we're not paying attention. And that's where the fitness industry, I think, is missing their biggest impact. Not in the individual's life, like, okay, I'm winning this championship or I'm doing this, but how many lives are you going to impact by carrying the torch of this is somewhat of how you should live your life? Because everyone else that's living the standard American lifestyle is getting sick.
So Vince, you basically said that, so many people that are coming to you for help, their hormones are an absolute mess. What are some of the most common causes for those hormone imbalances? Is it diet? Is it stress? Is it lifestyle? Is it not exercising? Is it a combination of all of those?
Well, okay, so there is the fitness hormone imbalance issue, and then there is the normal lifestyle, individual lifestyle or hormone issue. Where they both have crossover, one of the biggest reasons is stress and overtraining and undereating. That will tank. So I work with everything from cyclists I worked with an amazing facility, a doctor you guys should check out, Dr. Rob Kamenarek. He owns Renew Health. He might be another great person to have on, by the way. And he's got a facility in Springboro, Ohio. He's probably one of the top 5 endocrinology hormone specialists that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And we used to be having athletes come in from all over just trying to get their levels stable. Not talking about, enhancement at this point, right? We're just talking about stable. We used to work with a lot of MMA before they didn't allow HRT. They just recently stopped doing that a couple years ago. Worked with a lot of different, trying to do natural ways too as well. But every sport, if you train an hour a day, 6 days a week, and you work an 8-hour job, and you sleep 6 hours a night, you are guaranteed your test is going to be low, just about.
That would basically summarize 95% of our listeners. Is there something they can do? Is there maybe like certain supplements they can take? What would you recommend for someone, who does have, a 40-hour per week job? Maybe they're married, maybe they have kids, but at the same time, they love bodybuilding, they love MMA, they love their sport, and that's not something they're willing to give up.
Right, and nobody would ever suggest to do that, right? Now, there might be a way of training smarter. I think in the fitness industry, the biggest problem is we're addicted to more. More hit, more reps, more this, more that, more. More is the better. If one Tylenol is great, 16 will be amazing. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. 16 Tylenol will be your last headache. You know what I mean? But I think the idea is that the first thing you need to do is stabilize out the volume of food that you eat with the amount of training or output or stress in life. The second thing that you can do is manage your stress hormones better. So that can come down to, you can do a lifestyle, again, getting your sleep up to the 8 hours. I know a lot of people say, oh, I need 5 hours. I feel that way. That's what your body's telling you. It's accepting that you only sleep 5 hours. So now it's waking you up early. But I'll tell you that in the long run, it's going to tear your body down sooner. Just because you feel that way now doesn't mean that's how it's supposed to be. So there are a lot of herbs called adaptogens that will help your body adjust stress hormones to adjust to the day. They're called adaptogens. These adaptogens help the HPA, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland, adapt to stressful environments without putting a toll on the body. Some of the biggest ones that we know in fitness so far that have become really popular that we use in functional medicine are ashwagandha, rhodiola, Asian ginseng. These are big ones that are used a lot. And there are so many other tools that I really like to use in terms of a bacopa, licorice. There are plenty more. I don't want to just keep rattling them off. Cordyceps, that's more of a mushroom base, but these things are adaptogens that will help your body even out how much stress hormone it makes and how it breaks it down and calms it down and goes through that natural process. Because what happens is, gentlemen, long story short, cholesterol is what makes all your hormones. Okay? So this is why the average male, long story short, gets elevated risk for stroke, because as the cortisol comes in, if the adrenal glands and the thyroid are all stressed out, it will inhibit the production of pregnenolone, which starts the hormone cascade. And in fact, take that cholesterol and put it into your arteries. So that's why you're seeing today all these estrogen-dominant males with gynecomastia, or like a breast tissue, that are also the ones having the heart attacks at a high rate, right? And so if you start with stress hormone, and that's again with the average guy that works out. Now, I know you guys have spoken to a lot of people, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about training. And I don't want to step on toes or talk about, because sometimes to get yourself to a peak performance, you got to step outside the normal boundaries and do this and that for seasons and things like that. But in general, my suggestion to manage hormones correctly is to optimize 4 really strong workouts a week and get plenty of rest. But again, there's different reasons to do different things. So I don't want to slap down on everybody. But that would be one of the things if I was trying to tie in overtraining stress to like day-to-day stress. That would be my tie-in for fitness advocates.
I just want you to know, man, that listen, we want to hear your opinion. You're the guest. So there's no like, we're not, you know, you're not, there's no right or wrong here. We want to hear your opinion, but I agree with you. I actually only work out 3 or 4 times a week, and my workouts are quick and to the point. I handle my business and I'm out. And I've had the best results of my life doing that versus training.
There it is. Less is more, man. Hell yeah, brother. Less is more.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast. I see people that are in there every day, and I see people working out for an hour and a half. They look like shit, you know? So I handle my business and I'm in and out. So I definitely agree with that, and I can definitely feel it when I overtrain my body. So there's a lot of time.
Can I give you a little nugget there real quick? Really cool. So this is where functional medicine and fitness tie right in. That is like this huge like pro tip. So if you're training a lot and you're eating a high protein diet and you're training for extended periods of time, your body has to do a lot of catabolic activity, okay? The breaking down of proteins into simple energy, right? That process is actually oxidative. Cracking apart protein for energy releases a lot of oxidative stress on the body, believe it or not. Now, it's not that you can't do that and survive on it. It's not the point. So, and then when you're training way too much and everything, you're breaking open a lot of O2 molecules too for oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange. That's very oxidative. The reason why is because the bond of O2 to crack it open and use, it's such a strong bond. Your body's really got to force it, and it creates oxidative stress. So it creates more catabolic behavior. So the longer you go, the more likely you are to eat muscle tissue while training your muscle tissue. And on the same token, the big ticket is you age yourself faster. So if you overtrain, that oxidative stress, if you're not taking a lot of phytonutrients that raise your cellular defenses, that it will break down the fatty acid bonds in your cell walls. So I don't know if you guys notice it, and I'm just going to say it on this podcast. There are a lot of people who compete or train, and they look 97 years old, and they're lean as hell, and you ask yourself, how did that happen to them? Now, there are some genetic reasons for that, and we can talk about that in another show. But you really want to protect your youth and vitality, too, and how well you develop in your muscle. If you're breaking down so much muscle, and you're putting all that oxidative stress on your body, and you're not giving it enough to recover, you're eating that muscle tissue to work that muscle to then try to just grow it back what you ate. So it's very interesting.
So it's very impressive. I know Trevor has a question, but it's very impressive, you know, like I said, the Instagram transformations, and there's definitely a lot of topics we want to get to in this show. But the biggest one that we see on the forum, obviously, is guys want to lose weight. Girls want to lose weight.
Yeah.
So what are the mistakes that people are making when they come to you, and that you correct, that really makes a big difference? I know you can't get into the entire program, but give some of our listeners something. Maybe they're doing something in their day-to-day life that's wrong that they can correct immediately.
Sure. Good question. Let's talk about one common fail. And this one, I don't know if this has been brought up on the cast before, but with males have been put under the impression that if they go and get testosterone replacement therapy or take a bunch of hormones, they're going to lose weight. That's not true. Testosterone, newsflash, it may be androgenic and that has some fat burning properties, but it does not, I repeat, in no way, shape, or form burn fat, like in terms of like losing weight. If you get on testosterone or you take a bunch of things that's going to jack your test up, I actually keep guys' tests low when losing weight if they have a hard time losing it. And then once they've lost some weight, we get their test back up. All right. Same thing in women. So if they've got a decent amount of weight to lose, I want those hormones somewhat down and out of the way. Now, you have to be careful because when you do that, they're more likely to eat muscle tissue. So you got to feed them up. You can't beat them like like a sled dog and not feed them anything, because their composition is actually going to get worse as their weight goes down. But so one of the common things is people automatically for weight loss go to hormones. And wrong. Bad idea. Although I will tell you that getting rid of estrogen dominance is the key to weight loss. So if you get your estrogen down while you're trying to lose weight, your body won't be trying to store so much fat. But the number one reason that people are, what the mistake they're making is that they keep trying to push the easy button of restrict carbs, cut calories, and do HIIT cardio. And the other thing is CrossFit, and then they jump into CrossFit. CrossFit is not a place for majority of endomorphs to lose weight. You can get stronger, but for the love of Pete, don't go there thinking you're going to lose weight and your body's just going to look great magically, because it's not how it works. So they're going to hit cycle Tabata and HIIT cardio and 17 hours of, CrossFit training, and they're eating paleo, 1,100 calories. Oh my God. No. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking in my head, right? It's like, because what happens a lot of times is they've been doing it, when you do that for a long enough time, and these people aren't accurate enough on their diets, right? So they'll only do that like 3 days a week, and then maybe they'll get a little better and they'll do 4 days a week, and maybe they'll get a little bit better. But then on the weekends and stuff, they're like, eating Cheetos and chips and stuff like that. Most people, when they've gained a lot of weight, now carbohydrates, their glycemic index now matters. In anabolic male training, glycemic index is less important because you've got enough glycogen stores and you're insulin sensitive enough that you could Doritos carbohydrates and sweet potato carbohydrates and the same amount of carbohydrates can do the same thing in a very pristine body. I don't recommend it, but it can. But the more weight you gain of fat to ratio to muscle, the less insulin sensitive you get. And the more usually estrogen dominant you get. So now the sweet potato definitely matters versus the Dorito. And a lot of these people, they keep cutting their calories, but then they'll take all these glycemic carbs, and the body will take all that high blood sugar and store it away. So then you're spending another 5 days losing what you did on that one day. And it's this vicious cycle that the body eventually bottoms out its basal metabolic rate to a new metabolic rate, which we call your AMR, your actual metabolic rate. So a 200-pound overweight male who should be able to burn 2,400 calories can only burn 1,500 calories. And then he's down to 1,000 calories, wondering why he feels like crap, or he's down to 1,200 calories, one of his feels like crap, and his body won't do anything because it's adapting to that. Because you've just been sloppily doing it, not in a controlled environment. Nobody should be cutting their calories into 1,000 or 1,200 caloric deficit without the guise or the supervision of a nutritional expert, whether it be medical or in the performance realm, in my opinion.
Okay, so you're saying the mistake that guys make is they're working out too much and they're eating too little?
Yeah, let's keep it simple. I know I get long-winded, right?
Okay. But what about the people that are that never exercise and they just go and they eat shit all the time, like McDonald's and stuff? So that's obviously, you would tell them, hey, you need to stop eating McDonald's and fast food and start exercising?
So, okay, most people, because the question you asked me is not why most people are gaining weight or overweight. You asked me most people that come and see me. Most people today, because of the market, most people are not coming to see me right away. I'm the 9th or 10th guy you see when the Instagram workout program you've been doing for 5 weeks or the meal plan you bought for $50 online doesn't work on the 17th time. So these people typically, and it's different today as a nutritionist. When I started 15 years ago, Atkins had been around, a couple things have been around, but people didn't really know how to diet themselves. Today, people know enough just to be dangerous and screw themselves up. And they've tried it on themselves because they listened to Dr. Oz, or they, I don't know, Oprah's new weight loss secret or whatever. And they've tried a bunch of things. And every time you try something that isn't really right for you, you eat a little muscle tissue and worsen your composition. And this is what we find in research when we look at women, because the average woman, for example, has to, tries to lose weight 17 years of her life. She tries at least 12 to 14 different programs. or in our own, like, trying trial and error or working with somebody. And I find that's the problem, because if I get an individual that's just been sitting on the couch and eating garbage, yeah, the first thing you want to do is get rid of processed foods because they're estrogenic. All processed foods, most drugs, most drinking water today, like water from, that you get out of a well or something like that, has estrogenic elements in it that your body thinks is estrogen and uses it at the cell receptor site as estrogen. It's called a xenohormone, okay? Xenohormitic. And so, like styrofoam, bisphenol from plastic, fried foods have acrylamide in them and other xenohormitic things. Most drugs are xenohormitic. In fact, they've been doing a lot of research on schools of fish that are near the waste area for pharmaceutical companies. And all those schools of fish have now turned female. And there's plenty of research out there you can look yourself. This is a real thing. And amphibians, too, that live in indigenous areas of chemical exposure from pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, man, it's horrible, man. I'm a big environmentalist, so you're definitely like breaking my heart on this. But yeah, it's definitely true. It's a damn shame.
Absolutely true.
I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the xenoestrogens. Most of our listeners, they're using things like Tupperware on a daily basis. What are your thoughts on plastic Tupperware? And then also you mentioned water. What do you recommend for water treatment, water filters, that sort of thing?
Good. Great question, actually. The first thing that anybody can do very easily when it comes down to water is here's the issue. It's a double-sided question, because if you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't, so you have to kind of find a middle ground. So if I filter my water, you can get a whole house filter that goes on the main in your house. Great option, okay? That means that you're not getting chlorine in your shower water, right? And then when you heat it up in the shower, it's not chloroform, because that's what happens when you heat up chlorine. You take out a lot of other things that can be coming from androgynous, whatever, reservoirs and whatever, the pipes and whatever else. But the problem is when you filter water, now you have distilled water to a certain degree that doesn't have any minerals to support absorption. I find that when I put the average individual on 2 gallons of distilled water and we do a SpectraCell test, which is the intracellular mineral test, that they actually are deficient in magnesium, electrolyte, zinc, copper, different things that they actually would need in micro amounts. So you have to then decide what you're going to do. So one of the things we do at the office is we have like a coal-based filter, and it filters through coal, and that it actually puts back in minerals back into it. There is like reverse osmosis. There's ionized water. It's pretty good. And then I guess the last one is honestly drinking mineral and spring water or water with added electrolytes. But you definitely want to at least put a whole house filter on and put it in where you interact with water, like on your sink and maybe your shower. But just doing the whole house is the easier way to do it. What was your other question that you asked?
What are your thoughts on plastic Tupperware?
So the average male that is very healthy, all right, so take a fitness competitor. What makes them different a lot of times is that hopefully they're eating pretty clean and they're taking care of their bodies pretty good. Your body will come in contact with the CDC says you come in contact with at least 500 to 600 chemical pollutants, and about 1/3 of those are probably estrogenic. But your body has this amazing process of phase 1, phase 2 of the liver where it processes these things out. And someone who eats healthy and gets minerals in their food and sleeps and drinks water, they usually don't have as much problem with this. But the other individual living the average lifestyle, it slows down your natural ability to detox. And so then your liver gets backed up, obviously, from alcohol and whatever else. Now, I will say this. For guys that use a lot of gear and they're not taking enough liver support, this is another way you can get gyno very easily if you're not paying attention. You can be on and I've seen guys, it's happened with guys, because we'll do toxicity studies on competitors, like a heavy metals test or like a toxicity test, you can do a hair test, on competitors that are even on anti-estrogens while on, a bunch of things. And they'll have a lot of xenohormones in their body that it wasn't really cleaning out enough, even though they were on an anti-estrogen, like, well, you name any of them, I don't care, Novadex or whatever. So it's something interesting. So at that point, plastics you want to try to start to watch it if you can. But if you're somebody taking liver support, eating really clean, all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't be as worried. But the average individual, yes, you want to try to use glass, or they're trying to get rid of BPA, as you guys know, in plastics. That's the xenoestrogen that's in there that also causes like infertility, and they're worried about it with, a lot of brain conditions, and so Alzheimer's. And so the industry switched to BPB, right? And actually the studies coming out of BPB are worse than BPA now. So the industry the last 3 years is scrambling, and they're moving to something called tritium. But tritium hasn't even been tested. So we don't even know what that's going to do to the population. So a lot of times plastics, while can be your friend, if you got to use them sometimes, fine. Don't freak out and not drink out of a plastic bottle or whatever. But most of your containers that store food at home definitely should be, again, whether you got pores, you got all the different types of carriers that aren't related to plastic. Glass is my favorite, obviously. Cooking things in steel and stuff like that versus using like a non-stick cookware is a very similar topic. All that kind of stuff is a good way to kind of like manage and not use so much plastic in your day.
Vince, I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll let Steve pick your brain next. I wanted to ask you about liver support. Liver toxic oral steroids are something a lot of our listeners use regularly, things like D-Bol, Winstrol, Anavar, things like that. I wanted to ask you, what do you recommend for liver support? And then if someone is using an oral steroid, would you want to time the liver support at the same time you take the oral steroid? Would you want to separate the two? Give us the liver support 101.
I think one of the best tools, because anti-estrogens by themselves do a pretty good job if they're using some things like that to help the body in terms of processing estrogen, and not getting some of the side effects that would come when the liver gets overwhelmed from estrogen dominance or the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. But the first thing that I would say is that what I do notice is in heavy gear users is usually digestive issues. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but and it usually has to do with processing fats, because the liver's a little bit overworked, especially androgenic ones or things when you get into the draws, but also your androgenic ones like Winstrol. What I see is that they need to open their liver ducts up. So they need to be using one thing right off the bat to help with digestion is they need ox bile, for sure. Ox bile with high-fat meals will help a lot break down those fats and utilize them. But elements that I absolutely recommend is high-volume vitamin A, about 5 times over RDI. So you'd be looking at, or 3 times above RDI would be fine. So 5 to 7,000 IU vitamin A, because that helps clean the liver out. Thiamine is really good to help with that too as well. And of course, there's the common ones to help protect from liver damage, the use of steroids. And those elements would be like SOD, superoxide dismutase, milk thistle, N-acetylcysteine, and I recommend raw bovine liver.
Yeah, that's really, really good, man. You're giving us some really good information here. I noticed on your Instagram page, I have a couple things I want to throw at you. I saw you mentioned the 4R program for stomach issues like Crohn's or IBS or something. What does that mean, 4R program? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so recently as science changes, so do the terms, right? So it's called the 5R program. And, but I still refer to it sometimes as the 4R because when I'm getting going on social media, I'm thinking about some other things and I don't add that last R. But so remember how I told you in the beginning of the episode about being a Blandite? And Jeffrey Bland, he's got a great book out called The Disease Delusion. Talk about the future of medicine and looking at individualized medicine. And he developed a system for healing the gut called the 4R program. And so when you look at it, the problem with people just trying to throw crap at their gut is that, like, let's say, let's say you listen to, again, an episode of something like this and you hear, probiotics, right? And you throw a probiotic in there. Well, the gut is its own environment. And so long story short, it's like trying to produce a really good lawn on your yard. You know what I mean? It's like, hey guys, I want to grow a really nice yard. How do I do that? And someone might say, water it twice a day. So you go out there and you water it twice a day, not knowing that your soil's crap and you actually need to prep your soil. And then you go, well, this isn't really working. The problem is you need a lot of things done in a certain organizational pattern to be very successful in healing the gut. And so not only does the type of elements that you use matter, but in the order that you use them. So the 4R program is, the first R is remove. You want to remove inflammatory things, bad bacteria, and so you use certain elements to do that. The second R is replace. You want to replace, because in every inflamed gut, there are digestive enzymes that get produced less. So figuring out if it's from the duodenum, or stomach, or pancreas, or the liver, and then putting those back in to help the body balance that out. 3 is called repair. Repair is repairing the damaged tissue that's irritated inside the gut. And then 4 is reinoculate. Reinoculate, just so you guys understand, the gut is a lot like the Northern Hemisphere. So, like, I guess you could say, like, there's certain bacteria that like being in Canada, and there's certain bacteria that like being in South America because they like the different temperatures. Well, inside the body, that's called pH. And so if a lot of the Canadians are heading south past the border, that's a problem. Or, if Venezuelans are coming up into America, that's a problem. They're supposed to stay where they're at in order for your gut to kind of work well. And so we've got to make sure that the right bacteria in certain volumes help restore, the balance inside the gut. And the 5th R really today is called resolve. And that has to do with the mucosa lining. So after everything's good, well, and done, you're supposed to have a pretty thick mucus lining that exists inside your gut. So a bit like your lips protect you from the harsh weather. You guys know how when your lips dry, about probably by the end of the day, they're going to crack and split, right? So you start using some Carmex or whatever you use. Well, the gut has something like that, but it's its own mucus that it produces. And a lot of times due to lack of fiber, lack of the right diet, or just the inflammation that was in there, the mucus doesn't come back strong enough to protect you from other insults later on. And so you've got to get that body to reproduce that, because inside that mucus exists all that fiber that doesn't absorb, insoluble fiber, or soluble fiber that exists in there, and then also the fibrous, like FOS, that bacteria eat on, and good bacteria then grow in there and kind of house themselves, and that becomes your layer of protection inside the gut. So that's what the 4, or now the 5R program is about.
You're very knowledgeable about this stuff, I must say. Like, you must do a lot of reading. Is there like a book or two that you can recommend for people with this issue?
So if we're referring to gut issues, the first one that I would recommend is the Autoimmune Solution by Amy Myers. And it's not that everyone has to have an autoimmune condition. I'm releasing a challenge. I have a 3-step nutritional system that I developed that is great for, it's a 3-step Whole30, but more fitness oriented. Okay. And that'll be launching in about 3 months. So maybe people don't want to understand everything, but they just want to walk through a nutritional system that kind of works stuff out for them with the food. Because the problem is the 5R program doesn't do the one thing you also need, which is you got to eat right, and you got to eat the volume of food that you need. The problem with, functional medicine is it ignores macros. And I'm sorry, if you replace the electrical in my house but don't give it enough power to run, my lights are still going to suck. The lighting in my house ain't going to work right. And then that's my problem with the macroers is like they're not appreciating the micronutrients in food and how monounsaturated versus, saturated fats digest, and how different carbs affect you in different nutrient timings. And some of that stuff really does matter. Now, maybe to the top tier performance athlete who has to eat 400 grams of carbs, that's not true. They can get away with a bigger flexibility. TEDx, I don't know if you guys, TEDx is a forum for physicians and world leaders and people to come together and talk about big health issues or issues facing the globe. One of them they're looking at today is metabolic disorders. And finally the medical system is saying, hey guys, how can a cyclist eat 500 grams of carbs and lose weight, and we give 60 grams of carbs to these metabolically, ill people or resistant people, and they can gain weight? So studying perfection is how you're going to learn imperfection. So how we help the average Joe Blow or, whoever lose some weight is going to come by truly understanding how crazy it is that somebody can take in all these extra carbs at different glycemic indexes and just chew it up and spit it out. And it's not just in your genes. It has to do with your mitochondria and how they're working. And so that's really interesting, because I think that's what the next 30 to 50 years of where we're going to make any headway in dealing with this global obesity problem that we have is going to be at, is studying people like performance athletes, whether it be in competition, whether it be in cycling, whether it be in whatever, and understanding why it is that their system works on such a perfect level, to understand what's really going on in these other conditions, right?
But I mean, I don't want to get on a tangent, but do you really think they want us they want to figure that out? Do you think the pharmaceutical companies and doctors and all the money these hospitals are making off our sicknesses, that's
No, you're absolutely right. But the problem is that eventually what I believe, and I've been watching this for a decade and a half. My business today is going to be how much we've grown and what I'm watching happening in the industry. The number of people that are turning anti-prescription, the lack of procedures that insurance is beginning to cover, the number of people getting sick in chronic disease that are putting such a heavy cost on the what we'll call the insurance crisis, or the global bill for the government, or the United States, even if we just want to talk about that. And then the holistic revival, and granted, you may not agree with every one of these, like gluten-free, anti-vaccine, vegan, vegetarian. Like, I don't want to get started because we could pick apart each one of them. However, they still all kind of stand under a banner that standard medicine and standard health today has got to change. And it is happening at a very accelerated rate. And so if you look at forecasting, like if you look at like GE and these companies that look at market forecasting, they predict that supplements over the next 20 years will grow 3 to 4 times faster than the pharmaceutical industry. Now, we still won't hold a candle to them in terms of, total volume, gross domestic volume. But I think you're going to see a point where there's going to be a demand, and guess what? There's going to be people there to fill it. And doctors who are trying to get out on that side of it will come forward.
So Vince, we got 5 minutes left for this podcast. I want you to finish up the show letting our listeners know what's one simple thing they can do to improve their health daily. It could maybe be a suggestion like start using 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar a couple times per day. And then once you're done with that one simple, easy suggestion to improve their health, let our listeners know where they can find you and where they can learn more about your work.
So one of the simplest things people can do to improve their health, we're talking, God, and that's a big question, but honestly, floss. the amount of food, it sounds silly, right? Like, what am I talking about floss when we're in nutrition? The amount of bacteria, the bacteria that we have in our mouth is some of the worst that we have anywhere in our body. And it gets into our system. Keeping either eating really clean or I'm not a fan of using fluoride. That's another topic for another day, but using or more organic-based toothpaste and eating clean is going to help, and floss is one of the number one reasons people can stay healthy, believe it or not. And then what was the other one? How to find us. So if they want to learn more, there's so many different departments that we have, because we do a little bit of everything from performance to health and disease. So if you're looking for health and disease, you can go to Nutrition Dynamic, Nutrition _ Dynamic on Instagram. You can check out our website, nutritiondynamic.com. As you guys know, you guys had on Jason Theobald, who is one of the best macro coaches I've ever met. He is amazing. And me and him have come together to, we have our own supplement line where you can learn a lot about our concept of blending these two worlds together. And that's New Ethics, and you can check us out at nevethics.com. We're going to be coming out with our own podcast too. We already started doing some of our recording for that, called New Function Radio. So be on the lookout for that. So yeah,
where
that's
can
my
we
shameless
listen?
plug.
Where are we going to be able to listen to the podcast? Because I see your website, nutritiondynamic.com. That's easy. But where can we listen to your podcast, and when will it come out?
Well, we're going to launch it. So we put it all together, and we're still getting it up. And as you guys know, starting that part, I've got a guy doing this for us. And what he tells me, let's put it that way, because I don't run every part. We're looking at about 60 to 90 days. There'll be a link, of course, on the website, and then all your standard places you can go collect, podcast listening. That's my understanding. I don't understand all the lingo just yet, so I apologize for that. But I'm learning as I go. I was in radio. I didn't do podcasting, so I'm learning as I go.
Well, Vince, if you want any help,
podcasting is the future, man. It's the future. All right, yeah, right.
No, it truly is the future. Vince, you're a good guy. If you want any help setting up your podcast, let me know. I'd be more than happy to help.
Really? Hey, I really appreciate that, man. Yeah, you guys have a great show. I've listened to a lot of your episodes, actually, especially in preparation, and you guys do such a fantastic job getting out information that people want to know. So kudos to you guys for that.
For your host, Trevor Kouritzin, for my co-host, Steve Smee, and for our special guest, Vince Pitstick, this has been another episode of Evolutionary Radio. Live your life. Look good doing it. Thanks for listening.